Hello, salam, namaste, and ayabawan. Welcome to Lyndale Speaks podcast, Empowering Student Voice, and I'm your host, Danya Dawood from Lyndale Secondary College in the city of Greater Dandenong, Melbourne, Victoria. There's a saying that goes like this: to be healthy as a whole, mental health plays a role. Therefore, for this reason, our college community takes the issue of mental health seriously by raising awareness and promoting better mental health for all. As we are celebrating National Mental Health Month this October, Lyndale Speaks has organised some of the brightest minds in the fields of psychology and mental health to come and speak to us on the importance of this topic. But before we can hear from our panellists, let's go on a quick break and we will be right back. مرحبا إن شاء الله كلكم بخير. أنا اسمي دانيا وأنتم سامعين Lyndale Speaks podcast.
Lyndale Speaks.
اسمي من حميد است و شما به لیندل سپیک گوش میدهید.
And this is the Lyndale Speaks podcast.
Welcome back to Lyndale Speaks once again, but this time it is with great pleasure for me to officially introduce you to our panellists. First up is Dr. Stephen Sheffield, an Associate Professor of Forensic Psychology at Swinburne University in Melbourne, Victoria. His research explores cross-cultural issues at the intersection of psychology and the criminal justice system. Dr. Stephen is also a adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins University in the United States of America. Next is Musi, the founder of Fine Australia and a third-year student studying a Bachelor of Psychological Studies and Business at Victoria University. Finally, we have Jazz Singh, a mental health practitioner and a qualified social worker who has worked in the public, private and community healthcare system for over 15 years. And for those of you who don't know, Lyndale Secondary College is super lucky to have Jazz as our own mental health care practitioner joining the wellbeing team. A very big welcome to all of our panellists, and on this note, I also would like to welcome my co-host, Ibrahim and Yander, joining us today from their homes. Now, I would like to start with you, Dr. Shepard. Can you start by telling us what is mental health and why is it important first and foremost?
Mental health is basically a broad term that refers to someone's level of well-being and I suppose their general functioning, describes how they cope with day-to-day life and the stresses that they encounter in day-to-day life, their ability to work, their ability to study, as well as form friendships and relationships, and essentially how they can perform at the best of their ability. Now, this differs a little bit from the term mental illness. So mental illness is slightly different. It refers to a number of conditions you've probably heard of. For example, depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder. And these conditions can seriously impact our behaviour, our thoughts, our general mood, or how we interact with or how we perceive other people. And these impacts can be distressing in our lives. So they can impact us psychologically, they can impact us physically, but they can also interfere with our day-to-day actions and prevent us from doing the things that we like doing. And sometimes this requires clinical treatment in order to get better, to feel better. But the symptoms of mental illness can also fluctuate over time. But generally, having good mental health and well-being is important for our ability to live a good life, to enjoy our life, and to reach our full potential.
Thank you. Jazz Singh, once again, a very big welcome to our college community, and we are so fortunate to have you here with us. Jazz, there are many students who have experienced mental breakdowns due to lockdowns and remote learning. How or what can the school community do to make them feel more comfortable and mentally healthy when returning back to school as restrictions ease?
Thank you, Danya. Look, I think the pandemic and the lockdowns has impacted on everyone. You know, it's impacted on our mood, our well-being, motivation, with our activities and routine. For some of us, even our relationships, our home life, and our education, which is really important. And I guess not knowing where, for some of us, you know, not knowing whether our goals for the future are still sort of sustainable as well. And like Dr. Shepard mentioned, you know, mental health is more than the absence of mental illness. it's a state of well-being where people can meet their learning potential, cope with the stresses they are experiencing, and what connection, what that means for them with their community and their friends. And I guess with the constant changes and uncertainty, it can make us, feel confused, angry, or overwhelmed. It's also important to remember that your teachers and your school community are there to support you. Your school's a safe place to learn. It's somewhere where you can get extra support if you need. So now the school systems, they've recognised the difficult times Victoria has had, which has impacted on everyone, as I had mentioned. And the fact that there's been recognition by the government on the challenges that young people are and have experienced through remote learning, and now we'll be transitioning to returning to school. So there's now a lot of focus on a whole school approach, where it will be about promoting mental health and wellbeing as a core role in the school to help students flourish in their education journey, looking at, building resilience and developing protective factors from mental ill health, and providing them with skills and confidence to self-seek help, especially during early intervention. So a whole school approach really involves everyone. So the school, which, the leaders, school leaders, teachers, staff, parents, the wellbeing team that I'm included in. So looking at providing individual sessions by our wellbeing team, by myself as a mental health practitioner. We've got a few psychologists, and also being able to link you in with community services to provide timely support for those, especially that might have additional needs. As well, and involving students and their families in the decision-making process as well. So I guess it's about ensuring that students can form resilience to cope and thrive in the face of any sort of events and challenges, and help them to build their skills and knowledge in positive social connections, self-values, and problem solving in a safe environment. So it is about now that there's a lot of recognition and awareness about normalising that what everyone has been through, and that we, are not in, what does the state of normality now look like, and that each day might actually look a bit different. So the wellbeing team, as I mentioned, includes myself, are available as a start off to explore the supports that you'll need. And I think reflecting and preparing yourself as a student, knowing that you're starting to transition, and how can the wellbeing team and teachers help you with readjusting to returning to school. It will be a slow transition, and the school is able to provide a safe space for students to talk about how they're feeling when it is too much, and strategies to be able to manage that distress. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That definitely resonates with me as a student, and I'll definitely be visiting the wellbeing team more often, even if that's just checking in and coming to say hi. But yeah, lovely response. Now, I would like to welcome Yander to ask her questions.
Thank you, Danielle. Musi, it is very impressive to see that at only 22 years of age, you founded Fine Australia. My question to you is, can you briefly tell us about your organisation and what really prompted you to start such an organisation?
Yeah, thanks. So I started Fine Australia in March. And it's a men's mental health organisation, just raising awareness for that issue, as it is kind of like an under kind of privileged and under analyzed sector of the mental health area. And what prompted me was because I lived on campus at uni, and seeing all those kids and a lot of the guys that were friends, were personal friends with me, going through so much stuff, and them hiding it and not, letting anyone know, that really, did a number on me. And I wanted to kind of, in my own little way, help out in my own little area. As I'm in my third year, it's hard, for me to kind of do anything, physical and help out. So, after I graduate all that stuff, then that's when I can get into it. So this is kind of what I can do short of that to help, push that ball further down for mental health and for men's mental health as well.
Thank you for your response. You mentioned earlier that your organisation, Fine Australia, is a men's mental health awareness organisation that aims to raise awareness on the ever-growing issues surrounding men's health. So do you think that males from diverse backgrounds suffer more from mental illnesses as compared to females?
Well, it's definitely subjective to the culture and the environment, and definitely your geographical location that I've found anyway. But culturally, yeah, there are definitely some differences, but I think it's very, very important to kind of take a look at men's mental health just as a whole. Because yes, men do suppress a lot of, the anxieties and the depressions, and they're known to not seek out that help when it's needed. And they also, contribute to a majority of the suicides that are committed every single day. So it's very, very important. And I think in my own, environment, like mental health is not really talked about a lot, especially from my background. I'm Zimbabwean. So, in a way we tend to, kind of, look away at that, you know what I mean? I'm not quite sure, why there's that type of motivation to not look into it. But that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to, learning and researching as I go through my studies.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very good point because, cultural differences may influence and even are cause number one factors which affect mental health. As you said, for men, cultural factors and where you come from and how you're taught to grow up and behave in a certain way can repress or suppress your feelings and how you're mentally getting worse and creating those mental illnesses for yourself because you cannot express what is going on in your mind. So thank you for your response.
No worries.
Thank you so much, Musi, for your response. Very inspirational actions by yourself. I'm now going to welcome Ibrahim forward to ask his questions.
Dr. Sheffield, as an associate professor of forensic psychology, do you think that the mental state of an accused individual, is adequately considered in the trial in pursuit of achieving either a guilty or non-guilty verdict for that particular person?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Ibrahim. So how would I say? So mental impairment, it can be taken into account during the sentencing of an offender. So in these cases, a report is often put together by a forensic psychologist or forensic psychiatrist or a clinician, and they'll assess the offender. And this assessment will outline, how that individual's mental illness may have impacted on their behaviour or their offending behaviour. And their illness can actually affect the penalty or the conditions determined by the court for that particular individual. So, for example, it could reduce their moral culpability, which means, what was their intention, I guess, to commit the offence. It could influence the type of sentence that the person is given. So a judge might decide that a prison sentence is not entirely appropriate for that individual if it's determined that the offender's mental health condition could actually worsen if they are sent to prison. So yes, the offender's mental illness, can be taken into account. There's also, in a number of, or a very small number of cases, there are individuals who might plead not guilty because of mental impairment. So in other words, they did not know what they were doing when they committed the act because of their mental impairment, or they didn't think what they did was actually wrong. So this means that their mental illness was such that they believe that they are not fully responsible for their actions, or I guess they're offending in this regard. So their legal team may argue that they are also, in another circumstance, that they're not fit to stand trial. So this means that they don't understand the court process or proceedings or even the charges against them. Now, those cases are especially rare. But in those cases, the individual, if they're found, say, not guilty by reason of mental impairment, the individual won't go to prison, but instead they'll be put on some kind of supervision order. So they'll either end up in a forensic hospital or they'll receive some treatment in the community.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you, taking into consideration, the mental impairment, not only using mental impairment as a defense, but also at the time of the crime, like automatism, for example, where they don't really have any control of what they're actually doing at the time of the crime, which would therefore suggest that if they didn't really know what they were doing at the crime, then how could they really, like, they couldn't differentiate from right and wrong. So there's no point in pinning the liability on that person for committing such crime. So I'll have another question for you.
Sure.
Is there a relationship between mental illnesses and the increase in criminal behaviour?
Yeah, another good question. So it's worth mentioning sort of up front that the overwhelming majority of people, well over 90% who have a mental illness don't offend at all. They don't engage in violent behaviour, they don't engage in offending behaviour, criminal behaviour. However, there is a very, very small link between particular types of mental illnesses and offending. So those who might have a very serious mental illness or condition, particularly those with, say, schizophrenia, for example. But a big part of that is the influence of other factors, right? So if they're abusing substances, for example, or experiencing, severe hardship or social deprivation. But mental illness generally doesn't cause offending. But as I mentioned earlier, my prior answer, it can interfere with your day-to-day functioning. It can interfere with your decision-making. It can interfere with your problem-solving skills. And when this occurs, and let's say you're experiencing, other difficulties in life, say disadvantage, family conflict, alcohol and drug problems, say disengagement from school and employment, then this can make you even more vulnerable to offending behaviours. And that's part of why we see much higher rates of individuals with experiencing mental illness in prison compared to those in the community.
Yeah, also great answer. I have another question. Is there a point of commonality that can be drawn from the increase in mental disorders among minority groups across Australia, as opposed to the general population? I think this question is more directed at Musi, but if you have any answers, please feel free to say.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, and then Musi and Tinjot sort of spoke to this just earlier, but my work has identified that the prevalence of mental illness is pretty similar between, say, culturally linguistically diverse populations, and those, I suppose, mainstream Anglo-Australians. But although I would say that mental illness is possibly underreported in some minority communities, I should also point out that the rates of mental illness are much higher for some cohorts within the minority population, for example, those who are from refugee or asylum seeker backgrounds, some of whom have experienced traumatic, or adverse life experiences. And those specific groups, often present with more mental health concerns, in particular post-traumatic stress disorder. And this was mentioned earlier, but we also know that some students are at a higher risk of experiencing mental illness. And in particular, we found that international students are in particular. But I think the reasons for why people develop mental illness, it's pretty common, regardless of cultural backgrounds. So, you've got social disadvantage, poverty, exposure to adverse life events or difficult life events, those who've experienced violence or family violence, those who've experienced discrimination, use substances, and social disconnection. And all of those, social circumstances are going to interact as well with your various predispositions. But I would also say with culturally linguistically diverse populations, there are some additional issues that Musi sort of referred to as well. We know that culturally linguistically diverse populations use mental health services less than other populations. And when they do finally seek help, their illnesses are often at probably more at an advanced stage rather than seeking help earlier. And this could be to do with, not utilising services because of language barriers. They could be unfamiliar with the services. The services aren't particularly accessible. Maybe the services are not culturally appropriate. And sometimes, as referred to before, there are stigmas about mental health in particular called communities, that mental health is, weak, that someone's crazy if they have a mental illness, or that it brings shame to the family and sort of want to save face, or it's viewed as embarrassing. So this can sometimes impact called individuals, culturally linguistically diverse individuals, from actually, reaching out for help or assistance. So this requires us, we really need to improve mental health outcomes for minority groups by improving those services, improving our mental health literacy in our communities, addressing some of those stigmas head on so that people feel more comfortable seeking help. Musi's organisation is a good example, but it's also good to have, the community leaders, culture-based community organisations as well, to assist in providing that outreach and to support those in the CALD community experiencing mental illness.
Musi, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Couldn't have said it better myself, to be honest. But yeah, with that whole kind of cultural, that cultural kind of area where you bring shame to your family, or this person's crazy or whatever, that's very, very rich in a lot of communities. So I think, with that kind of connection, you can come to that conclusion.
Thank you so much for your answers. Amazing responses. Moving on, a question for you, Jazz. As someone who has worked in the mental health field for over 15 years, what is your advice for men and women, especially for youth out there who struggle with maintaining a positive mindset? And what can they do in order to prevent themselves from having isolating negative thoughts and feelings?
Look, everyone's mind sort of produces a steady stream of thoughts. When these thoughts sort of turn negative, fear, doubt, and frustration quickly can set in. And I do appreciate that stopping negative thoughts isn't easy, and it does start with actually noticing those thoughts as well. I mean, negative self-talk can often cause us to feel bad. It can make us feel hurt, angry, frustrated, very anxious. It can also make us behave in a sort of a self-defeating way. So like, for example, thoughts like I'm going to fail for sure might discourage you from working hard when you're preparing for your exams, and you might actually fail as a result. So negative talk can also affect your self-esteem. When you feel down, it's likely that you're hard on yourself. You might criticize and judge yourself unfairly. The worse you feel, the more negative your self-talk is likely to become. And this can also put body, into other responses and cause like physical symptoms of, anxiety, feeling anxious constantly, having a racy heart, sweaty palm. In terms of like, it can be helpful to put it into a more positive perspective on things. So, for example, challenging your self-talk by imagining if it's a friend in your situation and reframing it based on what you'd say to them. I think, we often are nicer to our friends than we are to ourselves. Well, I hope. And it is about recognizing the thoughts, stopping at that point, reflecting on those negative thoughts, on what is happening, why are you feeling this way, what are your current emotions, are there any physical symptoms going on, and challenging the negative or the unhelpful aspects of your thinking to respond in a more helpful and positive way. And it does require practice. So you can practice noticing your own negative self-talk as it happens, and consciously choose to think about the situation in a more realistic and helpful way. There's some really great helpful apps and sites in eHeadspace that provide information around negative thoughts and challenging those thoughts and using positive thoughts. And, the wellbeing team at our school, really happy to share information, look at ways to keep building that positive thinking. And I guess I just want to say that thoughts are completely normal, and, lockdowns and returning back to school can contribute to negative thoughts and causing us to feel more anxious. So it's important that, you're able to connect with an adult, a wellbeing team person at the school, or your teacher or your peers, and looking at reflection around reframing those thoughts. So because you can control what it is about controlling on what you think.
Such a good response. Thank you so much. So from my own experience and observation, I've come to realize that many young people feel shy, weak, or are more reluctant to seek support when facing mental health issues. What would you say to those young people out there, especially students who shy away from taking the opportunity to go and speak to someone about their mental health and how it's going?
That is a very difficult one, because I think we all can sometimes, for some of us, are quite hesitant. But it is more around the awareness that we've all been in it together, and recognising, that level that we're, in whether we're adults or young, in all different sorts of ages, we've all had a big impact over the last 18 months. So, and it is about that promoting that level of awareness in the school system, in the community, that, mental health is in any aspect, can be looked at from a positive sort of perspective. And it is, and encouraging, youth to be able to come and feel comfortable and to be able to feel safe, to be able to start off maybe with speaking to, your peers, and then sort of broadening that and coming to speak to someone that you can actually really look forward to in terms of implementing a bit of a plan for yourself.
Thank you so much for answering my questions. I believe Yander has another question for you, Musi, and you, Jazz.
This is an open question to you, Jazz and Musi. Do you both believe that cultural factors such as religion and certain beliefs tend to hinder the issue of mental health or not being taken seriously amongst people from a culturally linguistic diverse background? You, Jazz, first.
Thank you. And I think we've sort of really comprehensively touched up on this area. Thank you to Dr. Shepherd and Musi as well. I think speaking from my own sort of experiences as well, coming from a cultural background myself, understanding what my religion and cultural beliefs are very different to many cultures and religions. It does come down to that mental health is prevalent in our society, and for all of us, it's evident for different reasons, which could be, gender, sexuality, substance use, as a lot of the areas that Dr. Shepherd has actually touched up on, around family relationship breakdowns, family violence, all those sort of areas that can impact on our well-being. And I believe that sort of different avenues, that there are different avenues to be able to build that support with students and families. It's an individual journey and everyone responds quite differently with their experiences, their level of understanding of what mental health means to them and to others, what the symptoms mean, what stages of acceptance means as well, and information on what supports are available to provide that platform and to build that mental health awareness into our daily life. We all have our own experience and can only support the person, in their individual journey. I do believe that the government are recognising a lot in the cultural sort of space, and I have put in additional sort of funding into schools and the community for this very reason. So that should be some ongoing sort of focus in promoting that awareness, supporting the person's needs, the families, and being able to be open to different cultural beliefs, religion and spiritual beliefs as well. I think, we're all sort of learning to be able to look at our own sort of self-identity and what values mean to us. And this could look very different, within family members.
Culturally, especially in like where I'm from in Zimbabwe, just having a look at that sector at the moment, there's definitely more people coming forward to seek that help, especially in the past 5 years. But speaking to my sister, the social worker, and a few other people about what it was like maybe 20 odd years ago, there were more institutes or more clinics than there were people or patients or potential patients. So I think there is now coming to that point where there's a little bit of a correction now, where people are realizing that, for a better quality of life or an easier path is kind of more desirable now, where traditionally it was all about appearance, for culturally diverse people and, people in like Africa, Asia, where you, like we touched on before, you don't want to be categorized in that kind of like crazy or any of those kind of terms, you know what I mean? So it's really good to see that happening now. But yeah, it definitely needs to keep growing, in my opinion.
And I agree, Musi, and I think we have built a bit of a foundation, and we're sort of building those blocks, that we will in the upcoming sort of years. Sort of my experience in the health, sector, mental health have come quite a long way, even in the actual hospital system. I think for individuals, it's easier to see when you're physically impaired. So if if you're really unwell with a medical condition, or you've got a amputated leg, that's quite visually. But then when it comes to mental health, you can't see that too. So And you're right, and I think it's around that level of now sort of promoting that and the awareness around it, and people from all forms of cultures being able to recognise that, yep, that, you know, that this is what we need to try and build and strengthen our cultural communities around to be able to support the ongoing generations.
Yeah, and with that also, I've been talking to countless clinical psychologists and who run their own practices in regional Victoria, and them telling me that, you know, there's way more patients than there is, you know, clinics and whatnot here. So what it is trying to just raise that awareness, make it kind of, you know, normalized in a way to talk about that and go see these people, to kind of, you know, at least get people to, you know, go there and, you know, and have more and more institutes and clinics opened up, and more, you know, organizations like myself, and kind of have that kind of, you know, that other outlet. And also with, you know, social media and young people, a lot more young people now, you know, committing suicide and all of that. And personally, I know a few. So having those easily accessible, you know, apps or whatever, just to make it easier for them to do that, because I know that it's daunting going to, you know, Beyond Blue and talking to like a random person or whatever. So I think making it accessible for young people is kind of the next step. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Jazz and Musi, for sharing your thoughts with us. We really do appreciate it. But before we leave, a final question for everyone. What are some tips you can give a student to improve or manage their mental health positively? I'll start with Dr. Shepherd, Musi, and then Jazz.
I'll start by saying, well, Jazz gave some pretty good examples on how to reframe some of the, you know, negative thoughts and perceptions. But I think in addition to that, I'd sort of broaden out and say another key factor is just social connection, you know, good, strong relationships with friends and family, being involved in social activities, staying fit, healthy, you know, playing sport, engaging in other activities, keeping the mind active. And I know this has been challenging during COVID, and you know, there's the ongoing distraction of social media and iPhones and so on. But I think connecting with people is especially important for your well-being. You know, you want to check in on your friends and family, ask how they are, you know, be nice to each other where you can, and taking time away from the screen, getting off Twitter, TikTok and Instagram just for, you know, a few hours a day. It's important to clear your mind. So that social media environment can be brutal at times. It can be judgmental, and people can be a lot meaner online, and it can affect your sort of self-esteem. And it's also an artificial environment. So, you know, social media can be great to connect with others, but realize that it can also, you know, be detrimental. It can be a distraction, you know, and, you know, problematic for your mental health as well. But we'll all be out of lockdown soon, so hopefully we can all get outside and enjoy the sunshine.
Yeah, touching on that, with social media, especially during lockdown, even like personally, my screen time has been through the roof. So what I try to do was maybe one day or a half day, just try and just, you know, shut off completely, do something like arts and crafts or whatever, you know, like something that you want to do, or, you know, didn't have the time to do or whatever, and just get into that a little bit, get a bit hands-on, create some stuff, and then just let your mind just reset a little bit. Because yeah, the tasks on social media and like looking at all that stuff, and you would be on there for hours, and yeah, like with online bullying and all that stuff as well, like it's really, really hard to get a grasp on who you are as a person and to kind of move on, you know, mentally from a lot of that. And also I think just like physically, just, you know, going out for a run, or, you know, going out for a walk even, that could really, really help you out, you know, during the week. And for me, it starts by, you know, setting goals for every day. So once you feel like you've achieved a goal, you feel a hell of a lot better about yourself. So in the morning, you know, you make your bed. That's the first kind of small goal that you do. You know, you get up, kind of clean around a little bit, have your breakfast, and just kind of start the day like that. And whether you have an assignment or whatever, just treat that as a goal, not necessarily as a task. And I think that's how you can, you know, try and keep pushing on.
Thank you. Thanks, Musi. Yep, definitely, you know, terms of what Musi and Dr. Shepherd have said in the tips, I think I think it's about starting off slowly and sort of identifying what stage you are at. Sometimes I use the traffic light system, that Musi, I don't know if you might be aware of, but you could use like maybe a green light, where it means that you've got a plan that you've already derived, with your self-care strategies. An orange light can mean that you're having a day where you're feeling stressed or anxious about something, and then using, looking at a plan in place, like Musi has sort of mentioned about going out for a walk, relaxation or mindfulness to reduce some of those symptoms that you're feeling. And then the red light, what does that red light mean? Is that when you cannot sort of minimize or prevent or can't regulate your emotions and having that ongoing low mood. So being able to then reach out for that level of support to an adult, to a friend, and using some of the actual apps and lines as well. I guess for most of us, our family of friends remain a key support, and proactively engaging in a range of self-care strategies, as Dr. Sheffield and Musi have mentioned about regular routine with your, I guess important is sleep as well, having a routine with your sleep, getting enough exercise, eating well, and practicing mindfulness. There are lots of sort of excellent sort of guidance around activities and keeping in check with your mood, because at times, with the constant changes, it will fluctuate. And just bringing that back using positive thinking and affirmations through the day, especially when you wake up and before you go to bed. For some students have used gratitude journaling and writing that daily sort of assists with their changes. And I think Musi sort of mentioned around sort of, looking at goals, but using maybe a schedule on a diary or a calendar and scheduling activities that can help with ensuring you've got a routine, which will assist with your physical well-being. Having some reflection time about a hobby or interest that you can implement as part of your schedule. Some students like to have a big calendar and write one thing each day on the calendar to assist with their well-being, which, such as like learning something new today and sharing it with someone, or taking time to rest, listen to your body and know when it's time to stop. Thinking of a funny or joyful time you've sent a short text or email to celebrate something unique about someone close to you, and doing, something creative, like Musi had mentioned, around painting or drawing, writing, cooking. The list is quite, endless. So the main thing is to sort of take away is the focus is about you, and the strategies that you'll feel comfortable to be able to use, which will cause, that positive sort of outcome. And having regular checkups with your GP, ensuring that you can, I know it's sometimes quite difficult to do, but having sort of routine blood tests, because I think, especially when it comes to, vitamin D and sort of iron levels, they can actually play a really important factor and role with your mood. Thank you.
Well, that's it for now, everyone, and thank you very much for tuning in here at Lyndale Speaks podcast. With that being said, Lyndale Speaks team would like to say many thanks to all of our 3 panelists for giving up their own time in order to speak with us on this very important issue of mental health. Once again, a very big thank you to you, Dr. Stephen Shepard, Musi and Jazz Singh, and we hope to have you here again in the near future. And also, great job to my co-hosts Ibrahim and Yander for joining us. This is Lyndale Speaks. See you next time.
Hi, this is Lyndale Speak.
Hello, this is Lyndale Speak.
This is Lyndale Speak.
This is Lyndale Speak. This is Lyndale Speak podcast.
You're listening to Lyndale Speak.